And in this part, Maria will present her views about syntax, semantics, and grammatics, and we will have some comments of Professor John Bolender. And after I will open for discussion. Okay, so we will have more time so that you all can make questions and receive some replies from Maria and maybe also from John. Okay?
Thank you very much. I think now I will explain the syntactic features of my proposal, the semantic features, and the pragmatic features. I have to say that all those features don't apply to the same kind of entity. So there is nothing at the end of the day that has at the same time syntactic, semantic, and pragmatic features. So when I talk about syntax, I'm talking about expressions in a language, parts of the linguistic system that we use. When I talk about semantics, I want to think about utterances. So these syntactic expressions or expressions of a similar kind used by people, by real people, in real exchanges. And the same when I talk about pragmatics, because I have said I can't trace a clear divide between, in some sense, I'm a contextualist too. I think that what is said, the semantic features of our speech acts, are prompted by the context in which they are. So, let's see. Here I have tried to describe the aims of these disciplines, but the way in which I have characterized them is not something that I endorse. Just I'm trying to be fair to the tradition. So, syntax, as I see it, describes a structure, a skeleton that is laid. So, this is the traditional picture. This is not something that I endorse. So, syntax describes a structure, a skeleton that is later fleshed out with semantic features. Expression with their syntactic and semantic features are tools that can be used in communicative actions. The idea is that probably because of the success of artificial languages, of contemporary modern logic, this has been the way in which we have understood languages. And this is also that has been supported by mathematical mathematical linguistic. In fact, in Spain, probably here in Brazil is the same. We don't teach. We try to teach logic beginning by syntax, which is impossible because logical relations are not established between syntactic items. But we begin with syntax. We are very strong in our syntactic commitment. Then we try to explain how to interpret these meaningless signs and blah, blah. So this is the traditional way, the way in which things have been in the 20th century, and I think it's wrong. It's wrong. So my position, which is pragmatist, as I have said, is this. I think rational behavior, of which linguistic behavior is a distinguished part, does not come into portions. This is synehism. Human life is a reality that is continuous, and understanding it requires a global stance. Pragmatics is the foundational level of analysis. What I mean is that the general level, the basic level is pragmatics. What we do in our real communicative exchanges, and semantics is an abstraction, is a theoretical proposal, and syntax is a much more abstract enterprise. But both semantics and syntax are theoretical proposals, ways in which we advise others to understand our real practices. So I don't place them at the same level. So the order of the inquiry, when we ask about the meaning of truth, the order of the inquiry should be beginning with what speakers do with truth ascriptions, which are the minimal portions that are meaningful according to the Hegelian principle of context, and then continue with the semantic features that permit the use of truth for the purposes studied in one, and then, if we are happy, looking for the formal features that give support to the semantic properties. This distinction in three parts is very artificial. There are parts which are artificially distinguished in the sense that if we engage in these three levels as if they were different methodological approaches, what we should get at the end of the inquiry is that we have to explain, so our semantic proposals have to explain the pragmatic aspects. So what this means is that, as Brandon says, semantics has to answer to pragmatics. So we are not free to make any semantic proposal whatsoever. We have to make a proposal. We are free. I'm not a realist about theories. We are free to make any kind of proposal, but you have to contrast your semantic proposal against the real behaviors. So this is nothing that is separated from. They are not two separated levels. And the same with syntax. Syntax is a very abstract discipline. You have, explain how terms are combined, but you have to explain how terms are combined to help to achieve the aims for which our communicative exchanges are designed. So we don't have, in fact, we don't have three different levels. We have three different approaches to the basic level, which is explaining our behaviors or explaining our intuitions. A semantic proposal cannot be against our general intuitions about language. Well, this is at least my view. So, to understand how truth works in natural languages, one has to look at the actions performed by the speakers when they use truth ascriptions. If truth ascriptions are the paradigm sentences in which truth appears, in them somebody attributes truth to what somebody else has said or to propositions in a class. I said attributes. I haven't said that truth is a predicate or that we predicate truth of an entity. I don't want to say it. I could say it because I have said that I'm not a realist about theory, so I could say we predicate truth and then define predicating in some way. But I don't want to do it because saying that truth is a property is something that doesn't help to understand. So, truth ascriptions. Let's go with a list of different kinds of truth ascriptions. A feature of the proposal I'm making here is that it intends, or it attempts to explain the functioning of truth terms in any kind of truth ascriptions. And I have listed the kind of truth ascription that I think there are. If you think of some other example which is not listed here, just please tell me. So the kinds are truth as a part of an operator. So the sentence is, it is true that Sevilla is a beautiful city, for instance. Truth as used in a sentence in which they are quotation marks. Andalucía is bigger than Navarra is a true sentence. A third kind, when we apply truth to a theory, for instance, Darwin's is a true picture of how life evolved on Earth. Another kind, he said nothing but the truth. The fifth kind, he spoke truly. And then everything the Pope Francis says is true. I have tried to offer examples of every type of truth ascription. It's curious that I will say it now. So truth can appear in languages as a predicate, is true. As a sentential operator, it is true that. As an adverb, truly. As a substantive, the truth. The grammatical form doesn't have any effect in the job performed by the notion. The syntactic perspective has to determine the status of terms and their combinatorial rules. The truth predicate works as a nominalizer. These are Tarski's and Quine's disquotationalism. The intuition behind Tarski and Quine's disquotationalism. The idea is when I take a syntactic approach to the notion of truth, I'm not talking about the features of the concept, but about the features of the terms that we use to represent the concept. Because syntax is always linked to particular languages. So, some of the proposals that have had a better reception in the 20th century just touch upon the notion or the term's syntactic aspect. For instance, Quine's, it's not Tarski in fact, but Tarski and Quine disquotational approach. Tarski wasn't disquotational in this sense, but and it's something curious because some people say, okay, yes, truth is a disquotational device. Is it? Could be. But not every kind of truth ascription that we use includes quotation marks. And this is something quite obvious. Quotation marks are let's say, tool or a strategy that we use in written languages. When we try to convey the function of quotation marks in spoken language, we say something like that. We do that. Is it? reasonable to think that a notion like truth is just a mechanism to remove quotation marks? I don't think so. I mean, this is a reductionist approach to truth. What I mean, a reductionist approach to truth. But it's true that sometimes truth terms work as mechanism to remove quotation marks. But we have to offer, we should offer, a better explanation of the phenomenon. So let's go for a couple of theoretical distinctions. Imagine that we have a proposition, any kind of proposition. A proposition is the result of an assertive speech act.
It's not a presentation mode. They can't read it.
Ah, sorry.
No, it's just... where is it?
Yeah, no, it's here. Sorry, no. Yes. Yeah.
No, it's here.
No.
Okay.
Это now or? Now, I'm not talking about truth. I'm just explaining a situation. Imagine that we have a proposition. A proposition is the result, something that appears, literally, something that is built up in an assertive act. So we assert something, and then, by asserting something, we put forward a propositional content. Imagine that the propositional content is, so my daughter Victoria says, I don't like Mondays. Then the propositional content put forward by Victoria is, Victoria doesn't like Mondays. Well, this is a proposition. What can we do with a proposition? Typically, we can do two different kinds of things with a proposition. So there are two different kinds of acts that we can do relatively to a proposition which is salient in a context. We can designate it, so we can say other people, hey, look what she has said. So address the audience attention towards this propositional content. This is one thing. Or we can accept this proposition and assert it myself. I can assert it myself. I can say, okay, I agree. So I repeat the act of assertion. We were talking about syntax. Okay. If we think of words using the metaphor, the toolbox, we would accept that language is like a box in which we have different instruments to do different things. Then, if we want to refer or we want to point to a proposition, in this case, we have to use the kind of linguistic tool which is appropriate for referring. And as I have said, the linguistic tool, which is the kind of expression which is design is not the right word, but which is used to referring, to signaling, to pointing to something, are singular terms. So, if I want to signal, if I want to refer to a proposition, I have to use the appropriate tool to do it. So, what I have to do is designate the proposition. How? one way of doing it is by converting the sentences by means of which we have put forward this content into singular terms with the same reference, with the reference to that content. One means of doing it is using quotation marks. So quotation marks permit converting sentences, which are which are tools by means of which we express propositions, into singular terms, into names of that proposition. I have in my book I have distinguished between two ways of referring to a proposition, or two kinds of designations of propositions, and I have called them exhibitive and blind. We can refer to a proposition using an exhibitive tool, a tool which allows us, in the very wording of the tool, allows us to recover the content which is being referring to. So quotation marks are this kind of transparent, let's say, exhibitive ways of converting expressions of propositions into designation of propositions. But we also have blind designations that having the status of a singular term. We are talking about syntax, so having the status of a singular term permits to refer to a content, but that can't be, this content can't be recovered just by listening to the designation. Because if I said what she said, or what she said, unless I have heard her, I don't know what is the proposition I'm pointing at. So, quotation, Victoria does not like Mondays, is an exhibitive designation of proposition. Is a tool for designating propositions. And this definite description, what Victoria said, is a singular term which can be used to refer to a content, to a propositional content. So the content of this sentence between quotation marks and the content of these definite descriptions is the same, the first proposition. And now, so we have in natural languages linguistic mechanism to form tools for designating propositions. But also we have, in natural languages, tools to undo this movement, tools to convert designation of propositions into expression of propositions. And the syntactic job that the truth predicate, in this case is the grammatical truth predicate, performs is converting designation of propositions into expressions of propositions. This is its combinatorial job. So, if I attach is true to each one of these designation of propositions, what I have is an alternative way of saying the same thing we begin with. So if I say Victoria doesn't like Mondays is a true sentence, I'm just saying Victoria doesn't like Mondays. And if I say what Victoria said is true, I'm just saying Victoria doesn't like Mondays. Nothing else. So, from a syntactic point of view, the truth predicate is a denominalizer, is a tool to convert designations into expressions of propositions. Okay. The idea is now we could talk about redundancy. One might say, okay, then truth is redundant, because when you say what Victoria said is true, you haven't said anything else than that Victoria doesn't like Mondays. So we can dispense with truth in natural languages. Well, this is not true, but the idea is this is a consequence of the way in which we look at this kind of expressions. Christopher Williams had an example to show that from this kind of examples doesn't follow that truth is redundant in natural languages. If we begin, imagine that we begin with the number 7, and then I say, okay, think of the double of 7, and then I say, and now think of the half of the double of 7. At the end, we have 7 again. Or if we begin with Juan, and you say, okay, think of the father of Juan, and then please think of the son of the father of Juan. At the end, you have Juan. And would this prove that the father of, the son of, the half, or the double are redundant functions in natural languages? And the answer is, of course not. But we have this feeling that truth is redundant because we typically look at truth in examples like this one. Quotation marks, a sentence, and then truth. And in this very example, we are using two kinds of tools that neutralize each other. No wonder that at the end we say, okay, we have ended up with the same entity with which we began. But there is nothing wrong with the notion of truth. The problem is, if you use first a nominalizer and then a denominalizer, yes, yeah, okay? So we haven't moved. We are exactly in the same place, okay? Well, this is part of the explanation. So from a syntactic point of view, we need tools. Sometimes, I think in the book I have used the term plug. So we have, let's say, complex tools with different plugs that you can put together to convert an instrument in something else. Well, this is what we have in natural languages. So sometimes the truth predicate is used. So I have said if we don't move if we use two different functions that neutralize each other. Of course not. So what we are saying is converting one tool in something else and then using another plug to undo the first move. Then we don't move. We are in the same place. So, truth is syntactically, the predicate is true, is syntactically a mechanism to convert designations of propositions into expressions of them. This is his combinatorial function. In this sense, Horridge is right in saying that the truth predicate is a denominalizer. And Quine is right in assuming that truth is a disputational device. But not only that. So the syntactic explanation is true, but it's not the whole truth. So enough for the syntactic part. Do you want me to stop here, or should I go to the...
Is it fine for you to comment?
Yes. So then just one sentence, one more sentence. What I mean is that it's unfortunate that the most accepted, or the most widely accepted theories of truth from the analytic part in the 20th century are just theories that have focused on this quite trivial syntactic aspect. Of course, this is true, but truth is something much more complex. Okay, so. Are you using this?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just going to read. I don't need it. I'm just going to read. No. Okay, I'm going to read slowly, and hopefully a visual accompaniment won't be so much required. Now, in reflecting upon Professor Frápolli's clear and carefully argued book, I want to discuss some theoretical work in physics which appears to disagree with it. And I'm not assuming that the physics in question is solid. It could eventually be superseded by something better. I'm not suggesting that there's no alternative viewpoint in physics. And nor am I claiming that my understanding of this physics is anywhere close to being expert. The physics is highly technical, and I'm not a physicist. But the conflict between the scientific work and some of the theses in Professor Frápolli's book are evident enough that I feel the need to draw attention to the conflict. All right. Now, I want to begin by reflecting on a simple claim, namely that truth is unique. Now, quoting Professor Frápolli, Susan Haack has expressed an obvious and quasi-trivial thesis, which is often neglected, that although there are multiple truths, truth is unique. However, there is work in physics which challenges this. Christopher Isham, Andreas Düring, and Jeremy Butterfield, who are physicists at Imperial College London, they argue that different kinds of truth correspond to different levels of description. So at a minimum, and this is at a minimum, there are two forms of truth. There may be more, okay? But there are at least two forms. One truth for macro phenomena, including the things we see around us, and another kind of truth for phenomena on the atomic level. On the atomic level, truth is a matter of degree. It can be 30% true that a particle is in one location, while being 70% true that the same particle is in another location. So, when the particle is measured, it becomes true, simply true, with no further qualification that the particle has some specifiable location. No. For some physicists, truth on the macro level is classical in the sense of there being only 2 or perhaps 3 truth values. But on the nanoscale level, truth corresponds to a continuum, there being shades of gray. For the atomic level, the collection of possible truth values is non-denumerably infinite, since the number of percentages between 0 and 100 is non-denumerably infinite. When there's an interaction between the nano level and the macro level, as there would be in the case of measurement, then the type of truth corresponding to the macro level wins, and the nano level thereby exhibits classical truth in that instance. Macro truth and nano truth are not the same because they correspond to different types of measurement scale. So macro truth corresponds to a nominal scale, while nano truth corresponds to a ratio scale. So, on the macro level, truth values correspond to categories. So a truth bearer falls into the category of true, or it falls into the category of false, or in some conceptions there might be a third category. This is analogous to a nominal scale, where things are measured simply by being placed into categories. However, nano-truth corresponds to a ratio scale, such as the Kelvin scale, truth being a matter of degree, there being an absolute zero of plain falsehood. And, unlike the Kelvin scale, there would also be a maximum, 100%. However, just as in a Kelvin scale, or the Kelvin scale, owing to there being an absolute zero, one can speak of one temperature as being twice as great as another temperature. For states of affairs on the nano level, one can speak of one truth bearer as being twice as true as another. In other words, one can speak of nano-level truth in terms of ratios, but one cannot speak of macro-level truth in this way. So we have here two claims which, in my opinion, raise problems for some of the views defended in the book, The Nature of Truth. One such claim is that truth is not unique. The other claim is that there's a kind of truth, the expression of which requires reference to ratios. These two claims do not fit so comfortably with Professor Frápolli's view that truth is a purely, well, now I don't want to use the word structural or formal, but that truth is purely internal to language. To quote from the book, the predicate is true is a contentless expression with a precise syntactic role to convert designations of propositions, that is singular terms, that denote propositions, into complete sentences that express these propositions. It is, in Horwitz's felicitous term, a denominalizer. For example, the definite description, the violent death of Archimedes, can be transformed into a complete sentence by adding the truth predicate, as in the violent death of Archimedes is true, and the truth operator is understood in similar terms. A simpler example might be one of the earlier examples, like what she said is true. What she said is a definite description, so it's a singular term, right? What she said is true is not a singular term, but a sentence. However, if Isham and his colleagues are correct, then the truth predicates for nano claims will contain ratios. For example, the location of the particle at position XYZT is 25% true, or the location of the particle at XYZT is twice as true as the location of the particle at X prime YZT. So the truth predicate here must be doing something more than denominalizing. It may indeed be denominalizing, but some additional work is being done by the numerical component. To make the point in terms of the classical redundancy theory, the statement P is 25% true is clearly not equivalent to P. The choice of truth predicates containing percentages reflects some quality of the nano level which is not found on the macro level. And here is at least one sort of case in which investigating the nature of truth does seem to throw some light on the external world. Now, quoting from the book once again, truth is a higher order concept that does not represent any trait of the external world. This is hardly deniable. End of quote. But note that even if truth is language internal, and I was going to say formal, but I'll just say language internal, different forms of language are nonetheless appropriate for different levels of description. In other words, something outside language acts as a constraint on the range of languages or notational systems which would be suitable for a given domain. In the case at issue, it is features corresponding to different levels of description which serve as such constraints. But then different forms of truth, as embodied in these different forms of language, at least track different features of the different levels of description. For example, there's some feature of the nanoscale level which makes one kind of language, and hence one kind of truth, necessary for describing phenomena on that level. And there's a feature of the macro level which makes another kind of language, and hence another kind of truth, necessary for proper description of phenomena on that level. It might even be helpful to make the point in terms of language games, as quaint and old-fashioned as that may sound. Different concepts of truth belong to different language games. A given concept of truth may be wholly internal to its language game, and let's assume for the sake of discussion that that is indeed the case. Even so, language games are not chosen arbitrarily. Different language games are appropriate for describing phenomena on different levels of scale. And this is because different levels of scale have different features which make one language game more suitable than another. Hence, different kinds of truth do correspond to various features of reality. Truth and external reality are linked in a non-trivial way, even if the link is indirect. In fact, there's a colorful quote from Wittgenstein, which can be used to make the point, quoting Wittgenstein, "Compare a concept with a style of painting. For is even our style of painting arbitrary? Can we choose one at pleasure, the Egyptian, for instance? Is it a mere question of pleasing and ugly?" End of quote. These appear to be rhetorical questions, the answer consistently being no. Now, on the other hand, is it fair to be discussing physics at all? There are passages in the nature of truth which seem to suggest that Professor Frápolli's concern is more narrow, and perhaps she'd want to say that the use of language in quantum physics is not a concern. She writes, "Ours is a theory of the meaning of the truth apparatus in natural languages, a philosophical theory that seeks to settle conceptual issues." She also states that the task of understanding truth is a task which only requires philosophical training, and quoting again from Professor Frápolli's book, "Defining truth, that is, disclosing the meaning and role of truth terms within the boundaries of the philosophy of language, is a perfectly accomplishable task for which the philosopher of language with an average training is well equipped. Which seems to imply that to discuss physics might be going off topic. Okay? But note the point recently made about language games. If one insists on investigating truth in terms of one type of language game alone, such as ordinary language, then one neglects the deeper question of what it is that's making that particular language game appropriate in the first place. Hence, the issues raised by the physicists do creep in, even for ordinary language. The language game of ordinary language, including its truth apparatus, is chosen for reasons external to the language game itself, namely the nature of entities and properties on the macro level. But, as I said at the beginning, all of this is assuming one school of thought in modern physics. If that turns out to be wrong, then the objections vanish. So those are my comments. You're welcome. Well, I should return to my seat, probably.
Well, I'm not going to use I'm difficult, yes. I'm not a disciplined person. So, no, thank you very much for you. I mean, it's very interesting, the point. And I agree with most of what you have said, but I think I have an explanation for some of the objections. No, first of all, about the idea that truth doesn't represent features of the external world. Please let me wait till tomorrow, in which I'm going to explain expressivism, which is the semantic feature that explains my position here, and about physics. I intended the scope of my book to cover also this assertions in physics. So I'm not trying to say, okay, no, I'm not talking about that. Okay. So I'm just talking about natural languages. What I'm saying is, what I think is that, I'm well prepared to accept that technical languages or technical, so highly sophisticated language games can have non-standard uses of concepts. But I don't even think so in this case. What I don't know if I'm going to be able to make myself understood, but I still would like to say. Okay, please. So I'm not trying to escape. So I still would like to say that truth is unique. In the following sense, I don't know if I'm going to be able to develop an argument right now, but the idea is that the sense in which I think that truth is unique, so we have to distinguish between the meaning of the notion, and the criteria to apply the notion to some content. So criteria might be very different. So, for instance, if you want to assert something at a particular level of reality or a particular level of description, then probably criteria are different from some other levels of description. But the role that truth performs is unique in the following sense. Place yourself in your favorite level of description. Then, once you are there, if you are able at that level, if you are allowed, if you are entitled to assert that P at this same level you are entitled to assert that P is true. So, as I see it now, what I think is that the way in which, these examples that you have used are very interesting in the sense that they display the job performed by the notion of truth, which is talking about assertions and talking about propositions. But the different levels correspond to different levels of commitment with some kind of assertions. So I can describe a phenomenon in different levels. So, I mean, I'm not a physicist. I mean, I don't know. But the difference lies in the assertion. The difference lies in the description. Once you have described or assert, if you don't move from this level, the same entitlements that allow you to assert the content allow you to attribute truth to them. So in this sense, I don't think that this is a refutation. But you have pointed to a much more difficult kind of examples, which are the examples of probabilities. If you say probabilities, you say truth, that something is true at the 20%, or something is twice, or some content is twice as true as some other. Okay, statistical, yeah, okay. So the idea is statistical, perfect. Again, honestly, I haven't thought of it. I haven't thought of this statistical use of the notion of truth, but now I have been in touch with an approach to language that I don't master, which is experimental philosophy of language. I don't master the topic. But, I have been in some workshops, and so I know that some people now are saying in the philosophy of language, in the experimental philosophy of language, that the criteria or the requirements for somebody to assert a content or to say that he knows something are highly dependent on context in the following sense. If you think, so imagine that I say, okay, now, I'm going out for a walk with Sophia. And you say, are you sure? Of course I am. And you say, listen, if you are wrong, I don't know, your son will be abused and killed. So wait a minute. So then if you change the context, I could say, okay, I'm not completely sure, but let's say, I would say that I'm sure at 50%. So if it makes, I don't know, if it made sense to attribute statistical values in this sense, I'm sure at the 30% of what I'm going to say now. If it made sense to attribute this kind of numbers to acts of assertion, from my position, it would follow that the same sense it would make to attribute them to a truth ascription that have this content as their content. So the idea is, when you use truth, so why I say that truth is unique? What is unique about truth is its link with assertion. And the links with assertion is constant. The same, in the same degree in which you are allowed to assert a content, in this exact degree, you are allowed to apply truth to this content. So the relation is constant as I see it. So it did, but I mean, I haven't really thought about this.
What really struck me was that there are people in physics who just they really seem to believe that the work they're doing is they're uncovering the nature of truth itself, and that's how they say it. That's actually how they say it. And so when you talk about philosophy of language, I'm thinking that that's all you need to do the job. I'm thinking, well, those are like two really different perspectives.
Yes, but I have an answer also to this approach, and it's the idea, something that I'm also working in this topic too, which is the idea that people think that truth has to do with representing how things are. It's the idea of correspondentism, and it's the problem that is debated when people talk about scientific realism and this kind of thing. And people think that realism, the topic of realism is essentially linked with the topic of truth, and I think that truth is completely neutral, related to the debate between realism and anti-realism. So sometimes when people say truth, physicists for instance, they mean representation. The way in which language represents, I don't think that language represents anything, but people feel that language represents a state of affairs and so on. So I don't think that they are really talking about the notion of truth, but they are talking about correspondence between structures and reality.
So it would be yet another example of scientists saying that they're doing one thing, but they don't really know what they're doing, which is, I mean, that's not unreasonable. But scientists saying that they're doing one thing, but they're really doing something else. Yeah. So in other words, because of this, like, this philosophical assumptions that they're making, they misunderstand some of the nature of their own work. Something like that.
Philosophers also misunderstand the nature of their own work. So I'm not saying that we philosophers. I mean, I'm not saying that because I don't believe it. So I don't think that we philosophers have any kind of privileged point of view. Not at all. So on the contrary, I'm trying to put my work at the user's level. So I'm not trying to look at the way in which language, the language works or something from a high point of view. No, I'm trying to watch at what we do when we use language. But I'm prepared to accept that the way in which we normal speakers, use the notion of truth is different from the way in which some scientists use it.
It is explicitly correct that Christopher Isham is a realist because he does have a philosophical background and he calls himself a realist. So
I mean, I didn't know it, but it's something that I mean I can perceive. So this is a mark of realism. When scientists insist in talking about truth, it is because they are talking about representation, and they talk about realism, and they are engaged in this kind of metaphysical debate, which I mean, there's no problem. But okay, I think that my position is compatible with all these quotations. I mean, I should develop my argument a little bit more, but I can't do it right now. I'm sorry.
Can I follow?
Please turn it off. Time you want to speak, please. Okay, it's just a follow-up on that. So as I see it, one could go at least two ways in trying to
So one way to go would be to, as you pointed out, in some sense, try to offer some kind of error theory to explain, why it's intuitive for physicists to say that some propositions are n% true, and you offer an alternative reading of these sentences, something like the chances that B is true is n. I can try to reinterpret their assertions using statistical concepts by means of which I can offer maybe even a better explanation of what they're trying to say. I mean, it sounds kind of chauvinistic because I'm saying to you, what do you mean, right? Yeah. But there is another way, I think, that any philosopher that is trying to explicate the concept of true in natural language, as Willis is trying to do. Another way to go would be to say, no, I'm not trying to correct these scientists. What I'm doing is I'm explicating a notion from natural language, and not from some scientific context where the same word is used, but to express a different concept with a different function. So it all boils down to using the same word, but with different functions.
That's why I talked about language.
Right.
I was going to say, well, one could say this is a different truth apparatus and the two different language games, and those are two different subject matters. But then I said, well, there's still the question of why is one language game so much more suitable for one language description and the other to the other. There's still something in the external world that for a given domain favors one truth apparatus over the other. So I was trying to respond. I will emphasize again that Aishin does have a philosophical background. He puts these things in philosophical terms. He talks about a spectrum of truth value. I mean, just very explicitly. Like from shade going from white to black, and all shades of gray. I mean, he actually puts it that way in terms of truth values.
Yeah, it sounds to me like confusion because, whenever we talk about percentages and grades, we seem to be making reference to our own epistemic state.
Okay, Vasilis had a question.
May I? Yeah, no, I will jump in here. I mean, this is actually not as easy to decipher because it's at the core of the issue of the. Am I good? It's the problem of which interpretation of quantum mechanics you're selecting.
Well, I tried to make that clear at the beginning. I think this is not the only school of thought, but I'm saying, well, actually, I was going to say I was going to say this, and maybe I didn't apply it clearly enough. I just want to draw attention to something that I think deserves some attention. It's a little bit like saying, oh, I see that like the flood waters are rising, and the other person says, oh, so you think that the flood's going to like carry my house away? I would say, well, no, I don't know, but it might. So I'm going to tell you. I'm going to draw your attention to it. It's more like I just want to draw attention to something that seems relevant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that I'm convinced that it's right.
No. I was just saying, so one school of one interpretation of quantum mechanics, maybe you can it can be consistent with you saying that it's 45%. So when someone says, when the scientist says, well, the particle, it's 45% true that the particle would be this point, then you can maybe say, well, 45%, you're 45% allowed to assert that the particle is there. But there are other interpretations of quantum mechanics where you cannot say, where it's very clear that what is going on in the ultimate reality level is the 45%, like the percent that is there.
Yeah.
But you know this stuff.
No, but yeah, I know this stuff. but yes, but it's interesting. I mean, the most difficult thing to understand in this topic of truth is that truth has nothing to do with how the world is. And this is not an anti-realistic assertion. What I mean is that I'm trying to clarify this point tomorrow. And I'm not saying that truth is subjective and that I can assert whatever I want. No, I'm not saying that, nothing of this kind. But I want to stress, and maybe in these 3 days we can, we will be able, maybe we will be able to sort out what exactly is involved in this claim. But the idea is that the interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is strictly irrelevant for the meaning of the notion of truth. So that what there is out there is something that only can be expressed in, I don't know, probabilistic terms. I don't know. So that the probability of that the particle being there has nothing to do with my state of mind, but it's something which is real. It's irrelevant for the meaning of truth. It could be relevant for the criteria that we need to respect in order to make a correct assertion, but not with the meaning of truth. And this is the sense in which I say that truth. I don't remember if I have said in the book that truth is maybe I have said it, is intralinguistic. But what I mean, in fact, is that it is intraconceptual. So it's a concept that doesn't touch the world, in the sense that its application conditions have nothing to do with the physical properties of our surroundings. It's a higher order concept. Has something to do with our commitment.
The point I was trying to make when I brought in language games, so I don't know if that's a good way to make it or not, is that even if one assumes it's intraconceptual, there's still the question of which conceptual framework is best suited to which empirical domain.
Without any doubt,
yeah.
You are right. But I'm not that pluralistic. So I think that how can I say, the metaphor of the language games is interesting in some sense, but I don't think that, I agree with you in that we can't choose every time, or it is always open to us to decide in which language game we are going to engage. So I think that this is something, I think that this is a quite, in some sense, probably superficial interpretation of Wittgenstein intuition. It's not. I'm not saying nothing about your objections, but sometimes I think that when some people have drawn the conclusion that from this idea of language games, that we can do whatever we want about language, and I think that we have, and this is also an empirical claim, I think that we have a basic set of concepts that depend on the kind of animals we are. And again, then we can engage in different language games. For instance, I can engage in the religious language game or in the quantum mechanics language game. This is a different language game. But we, the people who are here, possess or belong to we cannot decide the kind of conceptual system we live in. So I haven't said we possess, but we live in. So we have the kind of concept that we have because we are the kind of animal that we are. Because I have also converted to naturalism.
I think there are more questions. I want to say something. Maria, when I said that I understood your intuitions, when I understood the sense of agreement that is part of your view of truth, this implies a kind of negation of metaphysical commitments. So, if you say that is true, when I say something is true, I am agreeing with a proposition, of a content of a proposition, then what you are saying, at the same time you are saying you don't want to discuss metaphysical issues, because when I say I agree with a content of a proposition, I'm not agreeing exactly with a relation, as you told John and Vasilis, between the proposition and something else. You are not doing that. But that's strange.
No, because
because if I agree with the content of a proposition, and I say that using the predicate is true, I'm not just agreeing with the content, I am agreeing that this content has a kind of relation with something else.
No. I mean, this is a quite...
is that what was...
Yeah, this is a quite...
Is that the point John wanted to stress? But so it seems weak to say that you need just the agreement to explain the meaning of truth. It seems that you need, besides the agreement isn't just with the content, it is the agreement that the content has a kind of relation with something, with a reality or with a state of affairs or with something.
Yeah, of course, but I don't know if I have something prepared in this sense. There is, I have said to John that sometimes when talk about this kind of the truth or the several kinds, they are thinking of realism, but also of representationalism, and it's the same in this case. So the way in which you are speaking is because you think that truth is correspondence, and truth is not correspondence. But I have to say, correspondence has a trivial interpretation in which truth is correspondence. Of course, saying what it is the truth. This is analytic. Something else is that I'm saying that there is a level of reality and a level of expressions, and that there is a function that maps one into the other. I'm not saying nothing of this kind. This is a metaphysical position, and you can have it. What I'm saying is just that when you say that something is true, not that you agree. It's not that you agree. It's not that you support. It's just that you are asserting it yourself. Full stop. So if you say something and I say what Sophia says is true, I'm just asserting it myself. And this means inheriting the commitments that you have accepted when you have asserted this content. Nothing else. Is truth correspondence? Okay, it depends. Imagine that I say, when can we say that the cat is on the mat? Okay, when we have a cat on a mat. Okay. And when are we allowed to say that Victoria is Joan's sister? Well, we have Victoria and Joan and sister, I don't know. And how or when are we allowed to say that I feel very happy here with you? Well, you, happy very, and where? So if I have to express this in a correspondentist way, I would say, okay, that I'm very happy here is true if and only if I'm very happy here. Yes. This is analytic. Have I get committed to an idea of some kind of mapping between some kind of metaphysical realm and some other kind of metaphysical realm? No, I'm not. So, correspondentism, what I have called the default correspondentism, is a trivial position. And it's our default position because default correspondentism, and I think I have tried to explain it in my book, is just analytic. So this kind of pairs, something is true if and only if things are as it says they are. It's just analytic, nothing else.
On the micro level, on the atomic level, the correspondence view, it just occurred to me, and maybe I'm saying it prematurely, but it seems to me like it wouldn't even be true. It would not even be. It would not even be true. I mean, on the atomic or subatomic level, it wouldn't even be true, because how would you say that? Like, it is 75% true that the particle is here, if and only if what? It actually, it doesn't even seem analytic. It seems false, I think. But I think that supports truth pluralism. Like when it comes to our ordinary language, correspondence is analytically true, perhaps, but for this different conceptual framework, it's not even true. Correspondence is not even correct. Which just underlines that these are two different kinds of truth, you know, I think.
Why isn't it true?
Because how would you even say it? It is 75% true that the particle is here, if and only if.
The chances that
yeah, but it's not probability.
No. Well,
I mean, on this particular interpretation, it's not probability, right?
That's
so,
just probability.
It's more like a mix of different states of affairs and different proportions or something like that. Well,
one interpretation is imagine the world separating into 4 different worlds, and in 3 of them the particle is there, and in 1 of them it's not there.
Well, that's
75%. But that's like
I don't think that's any problem for her at all. I don't think that's a problem.
There are interpretations.
Yeah, but let me say something about correspondence, which is very. I mean, I will insist tomorrow. But I have begun my position today saying that truth is not one on a kind, and it's true. So Strawson says, well, Strawson and all presententialists says that. So it is true. Well, Strawson doesn't say that this is a prosentence, but it explains it as a prosentence. So it is true is a prosentence. Do we have any other prosentences in natural languages? Yes, we have loads of them. For instance, that is O. This is the important one. a fact is a prosentence. It's a fact is exactly the same thing, exactly the same kind of expression as it's true. Being a fact is exactly. Yes, but yes. So yes. Believe me. We say no. The idea is, and this is something that Strawson explains. Imagine that I'm explaining the situation, the crisis situation in Europe, and explain that we have a very high unemployment and that people can't have a reasonable way of life, and then there are depressions, people are depressed, and blah, blah, blah. After having been 20 minutes talking about this situation, I say, because of this fact, I have decided to move to Brazil. Because of this fact, it's not because of something that I can touch. This is a content that I want to assume here, and this is I'm offering it as an explanation of what I'm saying afterwards. So the idea is the expression in natural languages, and this, I mean, Vasilis doesn't agree, but this is an empirical question. It's not that I say yes and he says no. No, we should look at the way in which we talk. And it is a fact, it's a prosentence in the following sense. If somebody, Sophia says whatever, and I say, indeed, or it's a fact, or whatever, I'm just asserting myself the content she has asserted, nothing else. So, if I put together, it is true, if and only if is a fact, I'm not expressing a deep metaphysical position. I'm just displaying a grammatical fact that can't be denied because it's trivial, it's analytic, and this in part explains the appeal that theories of correspondence have. Everybody wants to be a correspondentist. Yes, of course, because the simplest formulation of correspondentism cannot be rejected at the price of being empty, completely empty. So I can use it is true exactly in the same context in which I can use it's a fact. Because both expressions have the same function in language. What is the standard understanding of it's a fact? That it's a fact refers or represents a state of affairs. But again, saying state of affairs is also empty. Because we can define state of affairs. I assure you that I'm very happy here. So it's a fact that I'm very happy here. And what are the ingredients of these facts? Well, this is my position at least. Sorry.
But taking again John's examples,
yeah.
In science, when scientists are discussing about truth, this is, and they say, no, this is true, and the other say, no, this is true. Isn't there more in stake than
Imagine that
I agree with the content of what you're saying, or I am disagreeing. I know you didn't like disagree and agree, but I am committing. You told I am inheriting the commit. I am committed also with the same content as you are.
Of course.
Or I'm not committed with the same content as you are.
Imagine that a scientist says. Imagine that a scientist says, it's true that P, and the other one says, no, it's not true. This is what you are saying. So there is something there that allows one to say, it's true, and to the other, it's not true. What is the question here? The question is that if they say, one says, P is true, and the other says P is not true, they are just saying, I have reasons, or I think I have reasons to assert P, and the other says, no, you don't. Or, I don't have reasons to assert that P. Full stop. And does this have anything to do with how the world is? The answer is, depending on P. If P is an empirical content, of course, the circumstances in which I'm allowed to assert that there is a computer on the table are those situations in which they are computers on tables. But I can apply truth to the feelings I have for my children. And I can apply truth to mathematical content. So if we say, yes, but your feelings and mathematical contents are also parts of the world, I would say, okay, in a trivial sense, you are right. So this is why I say that it's a fact. It's just, it is true. So I'm not saying that we can let's say, concoct the world we live in. I don't think so. What I'm saying is that we are constrained in our acts of assertion by the structure of our surroundings. But truth doesn't have anything, the meaning of truth doesn't have anything to do with the structure of reality or something like that. Epistemic criteria maybe have.
I have one. It's just that I'm puzzled about one possible way to a paradox that could rise here. And I don't mean to say that this is a problem, because some people are comfortable with paradoxes, but and maybe it's a silly point, but when you say that, so suppose Sophia says it's raining, right? She says it's raining, and I say what Sophia says is true, and I want to point to the true value of my assertion, not Sophia's assertion, and then when I say what Sophia says is true, I'm making a truth ascription, right? This is a truth ascription par excellence. And then when you say that, when I say this, I'm saying myself that it's raining. I get puzzled, because when I say it's raining, I'm not making a truth ascription, right? And when I say what Sophia says is true, I am making a truth ascription, right? Isn't that a problem? I mean, this is connected with another worry, which would consist in saying that when the definite description of what Sophia says doesn't refer to a proposition, doesn't designate a proposition, it designates an utterance or some linguistic item like that. And this is coherent with a common phenomenon where, so suppose now Sophia says female philosophers are underrepresented in Brazil. And then I say, what Sophia said is that non-men philosophers are underrepresented in Brazil. And she corrects me. She said, no, this is not what I said. I said that women philosophers are underrepresented. So she's correcting me because when I use what she said, I'm designating her utterance, the sentence she used, and not the proposition, because purportedly these two sentences may express the same proposition, and yet she's still correcting me. So it doesn't seem that the definite description what she said refers to the proposition, right?
Not always. Several things. The topic is much more complex than I have explained here. Of course, I think I don't remember if I have said it, but I do believe that what is said, the expression, what is said, is highly context dependent. It can refer to utterances, to sounds, to ways of saying things, to many things, but only if at the end there is a proposition, I can attribute truth to what is said. So if there is no proposition involved, truth cannot be used. But second, when you say that maybe you have misunderstood what Sophia has said, okay. Some speech acts are successful, and some others are not. That has nothing to do with the meaning of truth. When you say what Sophia has said is true, you think that you are endorsing a content that hasn't been put forward by Sophia. So this is a misfire, nothing else. And the first question were something about the what kind of
He can ascribe truth to sentences.
I'm sorry, are you saying that she misfires when she corrects me about what she said? No, I am misfiring.
Yes.
Okay.
By an act of so there is, I remember your first question. Your question was, if Sophia says it's raining, she's just asserting, and when you say what Sophia says is true, you are ascribing truth. So right. It's not the same.
Yeah.
And I say, of course it's not the same, because I'm not defending that truth is redundant. It's not the same, but both acts have the same truth content. So both acts. So the proposition, which is the core of both acts, is the same. But you are doing something more than her. So you can endorse a content, you can support a content just by asserting it or by endorsing it from a different person, as when you use a truth ascription. So the content, the semantic content of both acts is the same, but you are doing something else when you ascribe truth. So I don't think that truth apparatus is idle in natural languages. I'm not saying that. I don't know if this answers your question.
One could argue that it's not the same content that I'm expressing in these two speech acts, because in the second one I don't say nothing about Sophia in the second one, right? I just say it's rainy. And it may be true that
that it's raining while it's false that what Sophia said is true. Right?
But this is irrelevant. If you say what Sophia says is true, you are just saying it's raining. Maybe you are wrong. Well, this is your risk. But what you are saying is that it's raining. Nothing else.
I think it's something else. From the former one, I can infer that Sophia said something. From the second one, I cannot infer this. Right?
Again.
From the fact that what Sophia says is true, I can infer that Sophia said something. But from it's raining, I can't infer that Sophia said something.
Yes, this is right. This is why I don't say that truth is redundant. What I'm saying is that the commitment that you acquire when you make this kind of assertion are at some level the same as if you were yourself repeated, it's raining. So again, I'm not defending, not at all, that truth is redundant. So I think that when you are engaged in a truth ascription, you do something else. You are saying something, and there are some inferences that we can draw from the fact that you have made a truth ascription that can be inferred just from Sophia's assertion. I accept this. What I mean is that the semantic code, the proposition, the basic proposition, I say the basic proposition just because there are so many kinds of propositions. I mean, the lectum is exactly the same.
Yes. So some of the points of, sorry, what's your name?
Luis.
Some of the points of Luis. So let me just pick up on Luis, and then I'll say something else too. So two things. It's uncomfortable to say that they have the same content, even if you say it's the basic content, and even if you go inferentialist, for problems like Luis mentioned about other kinds about inferences that one makes available, the other one doesn't. Like, for example, that Sophia has said something. Right? And I wanted to press also the other issue, which is that I might think that Sophia is God, and whatever she said is true. Mm-hmm. And I didn't hear exactly what she said, mm-hmm. but I want to say, oh yeah, what she said is true. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't want to say anything about really, it depends on how you look at it. What I want to say is that it's something about Sophia and her properties and what she says. I'm not asserting that the fact that it's raining. I have no idea she even said that it's raining. Right? So in a sense, I am allowed to assert that what Sophia said is true, without that meaning that I'm also allowed. Yes. And the second one, maybe I should just.
Yeah. I don't want to forget. Yeah. It's just so this one. So about so two things. You say that you agree with Luis in that you can infer different things from one than from the other, and the answer is, of course, a truth ascription is a second order act. So just because we are engaged in a truth ascription, we can assume that a first order act of assertion has been done or performed. So we can, because of the correction criteria of being engaged in a truth ascription, we can draw some inferences that can't be drawn from a mere assertion. I completely agree. I'm not saying that truth is empty. What I'm saying is that the lexicon, or call it as you prefer, I don't know, there is something that the two acts have in common, in the same sense in which there is something in common between Luis and he. There is something in common. It is exactly the same thing, I don't know. The other, the generalization. This is something that probably I will explain tomorrow. Proforms, prosentences are propositional variables, and variables is something that we need to make generalizations in general. So we can't assert something from a whole class of entities without having some terms that cover them all. And if we want to say something about propositions, we have to have ways of referring or endorsing packs of propositions. So, for instance, if I say, I don't know, the theory of evolution. If I say the theory of evolution is true, I'm asserting the theory of evolution. And I can do it even though I don't know exactly which are all the propositions that follow from the theory of evolution. Maybe I'm wrong, but the kind of act I'm performing is asserting an infinite pack of propositions. This is one way in which we use truth with general content. There is another way, which is the classical example of prosententialism, and is that the truth apparatus provides a rule for endorsing. It's a machine. It's an endorsing machine. If I say everything the Pope says is true, I'm endorsing everything the Pope says. So maybe I don't know because he doesn't say anything yet, but I'm yet committed to whatever he says and whenever he says it. So don't say it. So if you say everything the Pope says is true, you get committed with everything the Pope says, even if you don't know it. Of course, you can retract this assertion because you realize that you are wrong. But the meaning of your act is asserting yourself, so assuming yourself the content of his acts. So there is, the sense that you think that Sophia is God. Me too. I think that Sophia is God. But if we say everything Sophia says is true, we get committed. So this is the meaning of our act. Sophia, you are God. So you decide.
What you will say now
Yeah, it follows. It follows from what you have said.
What if she says that what you're saying is false?
May I say something else?
Yes, I would say that would be the last. No.
Oh.
This one.
Oh, okay.
The next one.
So methodologically, a comment. It's like you want to go full pragmatic, but in the way of describing the theory, you're using a very robust semantic notion, which is that of the proposition, as well as other things like singular term, reference, that deal with content, proposition. Very classical notion. I'm wondering, why didn't you go full pragmatic and say, I'm not endorsing a proposition, I'm not doing all these classical things. A proposition is just an act, too.
The content of an act, maybe.
No. If you go full pragmatic, you can say there are no propositions, right? It's all pragmatic, you just do things. So if I say what Sophia says is true, I'm just saying that what she did, I want to do too, or something like that. It looks like you want to have your cake and eat it too, and I don't know if it's
I don't think so, but you are right. Yes. Well, it's something that I wanted to do it because of the following reason. It's just because when somebody, not here, but I mean, I have worked with logicians for too long, so I know, and I have been one many years ago. So what I'm recalling this practice. What I mean is that when people say something is pragmatic, sometimes people think that being pragmatist requires you to be vague or imprecise, or that you haven't paid enough attention to phenomena and so on. And I'm not this kind of pragmatist. When I say I'm pragmatist, when I say I'm pragmatist, what I mean is that practices are the point of departure. Practices are the point of departure, full stop. And then we are allowed to elaborate our theories. Theories are artifacts that help us to understand the world and ourselves. Why I'm not allowed to elaborate an artifact? I'm a pragmatist because I don't think that artifacts are the thing in itself. No. I'm well aware that artifacts, are models that we use to understand. So I don't put too much weight on them. But I don't want to be vague or imprecise just because I think that practices are the fact that we have to explain. So in this sense, the movement is conscious. So I stress, I'm a pragmatist, but wait, now I'm going to explain my full theory with all its boring details.
So, thank you very much. I have something to say, but I will say tomorrow. So, thank you very much, Maria. And I see you again tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. We will have a lunch break, and then we will continue afternoon until 3 p.m. Okay? So see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Como já é? Não?
Ou então a gente apresenta 3 e 4 juntos. Você tem que falar com o grupo, não comigo. Não sei o que eu faço.